Now we all know about Skyrim's overpowered stealth archery.
'Cause it's easy, and it does a lot of damage.
But stealth is a topic for another video. Here I'm going to focus more on the archery itself. To begin with, one thing I'll touch on briefly is that the current perks that double the damage of your character's chosen weapon feels like way too much to me, and makes them almost mandatory for most builds. I think perks should be more for adding some utility, unlocking specialist abilities, or otherwise augmenting how a skill works, and that improving weapon damage should come more passively from skill use and character development. Consumables and other temporary buffs aside for the moment. One way of getting away from this boring perk system could just be to increase the base damage of all weapons across the board and have advancement and weapon skills do more of the heavy lifting. Or alternatively, and adding variety between different player characters from the outset, character attributes could be brought back from all of the previous mainline Elder Scrolls games, including some degree of scaling, and even maybe the addition of minimum attributes being required to wield certain weapons. These could increase with material tier, making the higher end weapons not necessarily the most desirable or even usable for unskilled characters, but adding that much extra value for characters who are weapon experts. Adding different bow types would increase the variety of gameplay and would give characters different options for ranged combat. Quick-firing short bows for nimble close-quarters characters whose speed and lightweight would allow the user to more easily loose arrows in between dodging enemy attacks. Longbows that require strength to launch high-damage projectiles at the enemy from a safe distance. Medium-strength bows in between as a general all-rounder that scale with agility. For our extra swole boys out there, I'm going to borrow the idea of a more fantastical great bow from another beloved fantasy franchise, Dark Souls. Essentially longbows on steroids, these launch devastating projectiles over a great distance, but being slow and heavy would have a high strength requirement and render the user immobile while in use. Lore-wise, these initially would have been created after the events of Skyrim, using modern crafting methods to combat the return of the dragons, but would also come in handy for felling other large beasts as well. These weapons would require specialized ammunition, also rare, heavy and expensive. After having made a comeback in Dawnguard, crossbows could see a renaissance in their use by military powers due to their high power and ease of use. These offer high damage per shot, have innate armor penetration, and do not have any attribute requirements, at the cost of only being able to fire a single shot before needing to be slowly reloaded, the need for special ammunition, and the lack of attribute scaling. The main thing I have to add here is that the reloading of the weapon should be a separate animation to firing it. This would mean that the player is no longer forced to sit through a reloading animation while an enemy continues to charge them. Instead, they have the option to run away to reload, or pull out a different weapon, or bash the enemy, stunning them, or whatever else they deem appropriate. If this is too many options, we can do away with one of the superfluous strength bows, like this, or, as I prefer, like this. With so many weapon variations, the crafting menu would need an overhaul. Basically, instead of scrolling through a massive list of everything you could possibly build, first you'd select the category of weapon you would like to make, then specify a frame, and then select the material you'd like to use. For a touch of realism, bows could be primarily made of wood and only reinforced by a secondary material of choice. An entire bow made of metal or glass doesn't seem like it would be effective or even usable. This change would also give wood more value as a crafting material. Along with different types of physical damage and armor, could be the introduction of different craftable arrow types, similar to but simpler than the ammo crafting system from Fallout New Vegas. Here's what I have in mind. barbed arrowheads for extra bleed damage, especially useful against unarmoured enemies or those with large health pools, but not particularly effective against armour. Regular broadhead arrows for general use. These are also good against common padded cloth armour. Needlehead arrows, effective against chain or scale armour. Square, wedge-shaped arrowheads that deal less damage but penetrate plate armour. Oh, and maybe this weird forked-looking thing for improved application of poisons? Okay, maybe not that one. No one really knows what that one's for. Again, in the crafting menu, you would select arrows, the type, and the material you would like to use. But so that it's not too easy to churn out infinite arrows, or earn smithing experience, these could require feathers or quills to make the fletching. Enchanted arrows could make a return from oblivion. Players could enchant or craft their own single-use magic arrows, which would be destroyed upon impact by the surge of magical energy. This could look pretty neat with current generation graphics. For balance, and to prevent the inventory from getting too clogged up, enchantments may need to be limited to predetermined values, with better skill and souls resulting in more arrows enchanted, rather than in greater magnitude effects. To improve parity of archery controls with those of other weapons, and to increase survivability of archers in close quarters, the bash button could be repurposed into a weak block, with the weapon still retaining its bash function. It would just be performed in the same manner as other weapons, that is, by holding the block button and also pressing the attack button. Speaking of the bow bash, though it is mildly useful for stunning enemies in close combat, it could do with a perk that improves its usefulness, as is the case in Fallout 4 with its basher perk for guns. It could also be tied to the archery skill itself, or even the unarmed skill, since it's basically just a punch. When the player draws their weapon, they are indicating to the game that they are readying themselves for combat, so it makes sense that the player character should nock arrows automatically when bows are drawn. This would cut down on the time taken for the player to react to an enemy. Arrows having weight would prevent archers from just carrying around infinite ammunition for their safe distance murder weapon, and also have to put a little thought into their loadout, and which arrows are worth looting. It looks goofy when characters run around with multiple arrows sticking out of their head without a care in the world. To reduce the chances of this happening, headshots should deal extra damage, giving archers a better reward for the high-risk option of aiming for the head. This would also go well with the limited draw time for bows, meaning you can't just hold the shot indefinitely until an enemy's head appears in your crosshair. You would have to put more effort into aiming and timing the shot perfectly. The more powerful the bow is, the less time your character should be able to hold the shot. This is also another opportunity for another perk that improves bow usage without just increasing the damage number, and would also give crossbows the added benefit of not having to worry about this issue, further differentiating the weapons. By the way, can we please have an option to turn off the slow motion kill cam? It doesn't always work correctly. At worst, this wrenching of control away from the player during combat can get them killed, and at best, it interrupts the flow of gameplay when the player is just trying to kill or loot something. And overall, it just adds one more thing that could potentially bug out. I don't know if these sorts of things are caused by bad hitboxes or due to arrows coming out of the player character or the camera instead of the bow itself, but it would be nice to have this sort of thing fixed, especially so that the high ground actually gives an advantage. Anyway folks, I think that's all for now. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments.